Hello, and welcome to the second episode of The Wise Guy 75. Today we're going to talk about races in Advanced D&D 5th edition, which is the first part of your choices to make a character. You'll want to turn to page 17, and there you will find the beginning of the list of different races. Some people may find it helpful to bookmark page 17, as you're going to look at several others and you're probably going to have to go forward and backwards a little bit. It's not perfect. They did abilities in this book, and the abilities kind of come before and they kind of come after, and basically classes, races, and abilities are all just kind of meshed together. But we're just going to try to cover races today real quick, like the very, very nitty-gritty basics. And I will start. The first one is, of course, Dwarves, because it's D and they go alphabetically. Dwarves have some basic bonuses that you get. They are, of course, shorter, and they don't really have much of a sub-race. There's only two. There's the Hill Dwarf and the Mountain Dwarf. Those are the only two playable dwarves. Each of those have a little bit of finesse too, make it just a little bit more towards one thing or another. You start with a increased ability score in Constitution with a dwarf. Your age is much longer than a human, usually between 50 and 350. Your alignment, well, dwarves can be about anything that isn't evil. Most of the classes, that's pretty much true. Races. Classes are something different. Paladins, for instance, have to be lawful even if their god isn't, just because they're paladins. So that's a little tricky too. Their size is like about 4 to 5 feet. They're about 150 pounds. Their speed is slower, but they also have no limit to how much they can carry at that speed. So that makes the dwarf the tank for everybody to put everything on and let them carry it all. They can see in the dark, which comes in really handy when you're down in a dungeon somewhere and there's no light. They have resilience to poison damage, much like an elf does, but unlike an elf, they're a dwarf and they don't have immunity to sleep. They still need sleep. And they have a special combat training that allows them to use dwarf-specific weapons, or dwarf bloodline as they were called in 3rd edition. They have some special languages for being a dwarf that they pick up, and they have stone cunning, which allows them to see unusual qualities in a stone. They can usually tell who made it and where. Just by looking at it, and they oftentimes can pick up secret doors or some kind of trap that's tripped off by a stone button, which is pretty interesting. From there you move on to Elves. Elves have a lot more choices in their subclass. They also are immune to poison, and they have some ability to resist sleep. They actually only meditate. It's very advanced. I suggest you read some of the books outside of the core books if you're really into elves, because the storyline about elves is very intricate. And it explains a lot of why they're so close to their divine gods. Basically, the divine gods are just the elves that didn't screw up. It gives a list of their names, what they use. It gives basic elf traits, pretty much high in dexterity. The rest of it's pretty normal for D&D. You can be a drow, a wood elf, or a high elf. High elves are prissy, dark elves are evil, wood elves are nature-oriented. Then we move to halflings. They're small little critters. Basically, it's a hobbit, if you're familiar with J.R. Tolkien at all. And their main dexterity score is in their main ability score is in dexterity. They get a +2 bonus. Their alignment, they can be anything, but they're usually lawful good. They tend to respect the laws around them, and they tend to be good-hearted people. It's harder to tear them away into the corrupt nonsense of the universe. They have a roll for luck, which is something none of the other races have. They're a little more nimble than most races, too. It's more likely they'll dodge a trap. And they're not easy to scare, probably because if there's food involved, they'll be there. Humans, pretty simple what a human is. There are a lot of different sub-races for humans. In fact, the most out of any I've seen. A lot of them, though, all that really changes is their name and their basic appearance. Humans get a +1 to all their scores. That's like a big bonus thing to look for. Age is normal. Alignment, they can be absolutely anything. Their size is normal. Speed is 30, which is normal. And their languages, they can pretty much pick up any of the common races: orcs, goblins, humans, dwarves, elves, all that. And they usually have the ability to speak common and then one other language. Moving on to Dragonborn. They're kind of new here. I think they originally debuted in 4th edition. They're kind of like a combination between dragons and humanoid creatures. I think specifically it was like orcs or humans. They can breathe flames. They usually belong to a clan of one kind or another of Dragonborn. Different kinds of attacks come from different colors of scales that they have, and their ability scores, they get a +2 to strength and a +1 to charisma, because dragons are very charismatic actually, and obviously they're strong. I mean, they're magically strong even despite their huge size. Then comes in the gnome, which, I don't see a whole lot of gnomes anymore. I think they've been taken out of a lot of games because they just don't seem to have a lot of playability anymore. But I don't know why. They used to be one of the funnest because they were the ones that engineered all the crazy steampunk contraptions. Their main ability score is in intelligence, and they get a +2 there. Like I said, they tend to be hobbyists. They tend to live about the same lifespan as a dwarf, or some cases a little bit longer. And they have most of the same abilities as a dwarf. They have 2 different subclasses. One's forest gnome, and one's rock gnome. And rock gnomes tend to tinker more, and forest gnomes tend to be a little bit more nature-oriented. You usually have a dash of illusionary skills. And then half-elves, kind of a mix between human and an elf. They get a bonus to charisma and a +1 to another ability score of the person's choice to show their human heritage. They can live a little shorter than a dwarf, about half the lifespan of a dwarf, but still longer than humans. Their alignment can pretty much be anything, but they tend to be a little less lawful, so they're more towards like chaotic good, chaotic evil, chaotic neutral. They have the Fey ancestry, which gives them the ability to use elf weapons, even though they're not full-bloods. Languages, they usually speak Common and Elvish, and they usually have another language too. And out of all the races that I would say usually try to pick up more languages, it would probably be half-elves, because usually they don't have anywhere to settle. They're usually constantly run off either by humans or by elves. Then there's the half-orc, who basically they exist because orcs got a hold of some human woman or something close to a human woman and made half-orcs. Probably against the woman's better judgment, but they have a +2 in strength and a +1 in constitution, and they can use orc weapons. They can read and speak Common and Orc. But Orc has no script of its own. They actually use Dwarven script for their own. Their speed's normal. Their size is a little bit larger. Alignment, they tend to be a little bit more inherent towards chaos. They actually mature faster than a human, but they have about the same overall life length. And there's not really like a sub-tribe of half-orcs, it's just that. And then there's the Tiefling, who, of course, comes from infernal heritage. They can speak and read and write in both common and infernal. They have a +1 to their intelligence and a +2 to their charisma. They mature at the same rate as humans and live a few years longer. Size is medium. They do get dark vision. And that pretty much sums up races. There's some spots in the book you can look at that summarize these things a little bit better. I'll give you those page numbers real quick. Yeah. Okay, so page 12 of the player's handbook really goes over the basics of everything that I just said. Gives you a little bit of a look over. It also gives you the point system for abilities, which I'm probably just going to kind of skip that because it's a short section, and I'll move into races next time. So, thank you for watching the Wise Guy 75. Hope you check out my site. I'm going to be working on some dice bags here soon so people can buy some online as well as at Darkhold Games here in Eaton, Ohio. Thanks, everybody, and goodbye.